Come in. Eish, sister, I'm expecting visitors and I still have to redecorate my house, so keep busy.
Hi, Bo. Relax. Go to Carpet and Deco. They stock carpets, rugs, vinyl, wooden and bamboo floors, blinds, wallpaper, and they do installation as well.
Carpet and Deco? What's the number?
Easy. 015-292-2219 for your Mahala quotation. Carpet and Deco, your home improvement store.
88.9. Welcome to the People's Station, One Nation FM.
All right. If you just walked in on a very, very chilled Wednesday night, this is just 13 minutes before 6 o'clock. This is One Nation FM on 88.9. I mean, before we chat to political analysts or what's happening in the country, one day, I always say this, one day I wish to wake up and then not hear sad news and not hear bad news. But that's all we hear every day. That's all we hear. We begin the news with sad events in Soweto where it's very surprising, because if we're saying that foreign nationals are indeed selling expired goods, but then we decide let's loot, it's quite scary, because why would you loot things that you claim are expired? Granted that we've seen that the police have made a breakthrough somewhere else, but to some extent I believe this is just all a propaganda. No. All right, so on the line we have Wotsang Muila. Wotsang, good evening once again and welcome to the show. Wotsang? All right, we just lost him a bit there. We'll just try and phone him and just find out. As I was saying, it's quite weird that we decide to then want to loot if the goods are expired. Why don't we do proper things? You know, this same goes to the whole issue around University of Limpopo, where students complain, but the manner in which they complained was not proper. And that's what we have a problem with. We think as a society, we need to find solutions as to how do we deal with problems? How do we solve problems? Because at this point in time, we're not doing it correctly. I think perhaps maybe we need a way in which, you know, we ought to do things differently. We can't, I mean, already the country is facing problems, and then this is how we cannot deal with them this way. So on the line again, we have Wotsang Muila. Wotsang, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, and good evening to your listener.
Thank you. It's very weird what's currently happening. And I just need you to just make the listeners understand the whole recession as to what might have, is it the Zuma issue, or does the current administration also have some sort of liability?
With regard to?
Recession.
The recession. Look, I don't think it has anything to do with Zuma administration per se. And I will explain a few reasons why I'm saying that. A recession of a country depends on the performance of the economy of the country, primarily. And we know that the South African economy did not perform any good in the last 2 quarters. However, the performance of the economy of the country is mainly reliant on the political decisions that politicians make. In other words, the effort that political office bearers do in order to stimulate the economy, in order to lure investors, and so forth and so forth. And I don't think it has to do with Zuma or Ramaphosa administration. It has to do with the current governing, because we may have changed the head of state, but the ANC has not changed its policies. The government has not changed its policies. Almost over 60% of the Zuma administration, cabinet ministers or executives, it's still in position, even if they were reshuffled around some of them, but more than 60% of them are still in government. So nothing has literally changed despite the heads on top. And the issue of people saying or being fooled to think Mr. Ramaphosa is focusing on getting investors to come and invest in South Africa, we will not see those returns of investors should they ever invest. within a year or two of investment, because it takes time to see the fruits of whatever investment may have been put into the economy of the country. But generally, the economy has been performing bad. And I've said this before, and I know it's a very sensitive matter, but I'm going to say it on this platform.
Yeah.
I do not know why, and I've written a lot of papers that I can share with your listeners. Why do South Africans, especially black poor majority, have to sit and worry and concern about the fluctuation of the rand, the currency of the country, when 2 years back it became very clear and apparent that the government or the Reserve Bank have no influence towards the monetary of the country. However, the commercial banks do. We all know that 17 banks in the world connived against the South African ranks to de-evaluate it.
Yeah,
and
true.
4 of those 17 banks are leading commercial banks in South Africa, led by ABSA, conniving with 30 other international ones. They came up, they confessed that they actually connived and they de-evaluated the rent. So that's very clear who is actually
colluding,
influencing the rent, and it is not the market forces. It is corruption and collaboration of the commercial banks and economic owners of the land. Yesterday I was interviewed at another platform, and they asked me, why would commercial banks and business people do that to the currency? Is it not hitting the economy? And I said, no, it is not hitting the economy of those who are owning the economy. If you look at how the economic sector of South Africa is stable, the government passes laws that they cannot control. And we saw with Tuesday today in Parliament how he ridiculed MPs. But the private sector, which has its investments and interest abroad, not in South African market. If you look at the mining sector, our minerals and everything, it gets exported abroad. Now, if you are a business person, you have invested in South Africa, and you are a bank owner with its holdings in New York and in London, you will actually want a weaker rand, so that when you export goods and commodities, they should go out on a cheaper currency, unlike when the rand is strong. And when you import goods into South Africa like fuel, it will come expensive. Therefore, the government and the majority of the citizens do not have control over that. And unfortunately, it will hit the poor of the poorest. But this has nothing to do with the current or the previous administration. It is how the economic setup is being run in the country. We've got a central bank, a reserve bank, which is actually a private bank. Yeah. We all know that the South African Reserve Bank is privately owned by investors, and over 60% of those investors or owners of the South African Reserve Bank are foreigners. So we are sitting in a situation whereby foreign nationals and a few minority are owning and controlling the investment sector and the capital sector and the currency sector of the country.
Just to focus here, one of the attributes of recession is low production as a country, and we've seen that with mining, we've seen that with agriculture. Is it because now the ANC has no plan on how to diversify the economy that we find ourselves not gaining anything within the last quarter?
Absolutely, you are correct. The gross domestic product of the country is the major contributor to whether there's recession or there's economic growth. Our gross domestic product will not do well because South Africa has moved from, prior 1994 during the apartheid era, with sanctions, the previous apartheid regime could be self-sufficient. They created Sasol, ISCO, Eskom, Telkom, and various other state entities that were managing to stimulate the economy by creating employment, to subsidize those entities to be sustainable. But at the moment, we are not only subsidizing those entities, we are actually pumping so much money and they are running at a loss or on a negative state of a balance sheet. So it's not like helping them to survive. But also, the economy of South Africa, many think, is dependent on agriculture. It is not. We're importing even the most basic commodities like maize, which in the past they will be produced in the country to even feed the neighboring states. The agricultural sector of South Africa in the financial year 2016-2017 contributed only 6% towards the GDP. At the moment, we have learned that it has gone below 5%. So you can see that the agricultural role, it's playing a very minor role, and it's actually going into a deficit at the moment. Looking at the minerals like mining, the government of the Republic of South Africa, and you have mentioned when you said the ANC has no plan, has no control over the minerals that are extracted out of South Africa and exported abroad to be refined and be made paper goods. They rely on what the mining sector declares for tax purposes. We do not have a count of how much minerals get out of the economy. So the GDP suffers naturally because we are not self-sufficient and self-production. We import, from all over the world, from the east, from the west, all over, even basic commodities. We import even fruits when we've got a fast fertile land with one of the best, agricultural atmosphere in the world. However, we are not stimulating that part of the economy. And what the government is focusing on in Agri-SA and the land bank and so forth, they focus on bailing farmers only when there's crisis. So they will have to wait first when there's crisis, then they bail them out. Instead of stimulating the economy to be able to feed ourselves, to create employment, which will create more spending of the citizens of the country and not spending and corruption of government. And that's the challenge we are facing with as a nation.
To solve all these problems we have, what would you advise the government must do?
The government or the ruling party, they've got the radical economic transformation policies that we all do not know. That why do they go into a policy conference, they adopt policies, very good policies as a matter of fact, I must state, which can radically transform the status of the economy in the country. The economy of South Africa is not in the hands of South Africans. It is in the hands of the foreign so-called investors, and I'm using the word so-called. If the government can implement the policies that are there radically and immediately, we cannot sit as a nation that 25 years since democracy, or 24 years if I may be exact, that we still have over 70% of the economy being controlled by the few minority. And the government can start with hanging fruit, low-hanging fruit, simple one. For example, say in your listeners, at the moment, over 90% of government contracts are given to well-established, white-owned minority companies. And we are talking trillions of rand that go to these companies like the PwC and so forth. If government want to use a consultant, they will go to PwC instead of taking small, medium, black enterprises, invest money on them, make them grow to be able to employ bigger people, a bigger number of employees that will stimulate the economy. So the government is actually having the policies that they are not following. They are focusing, even the expenditure of government is going into the wrong hands. The infrastructure expenditure in South Africa, and I used yesterday the Gautrain in Gauteng, for example, to say, did we as a nation really need the Gautrain? The billions, over 100 billion that was spent on the Gautrain, which is servicing a very little minority of the elite in the country. So our investment sector is focused on wrong commodities and wrong areas, while we were supposed to be investing on education of the masses and making sure that the youth of this country, after graduating, they can be absorbed into the employment sector. We don't have that plan of absorbing the youth. Even if education can be free, our youth will come educated and be frustrated. One good element, I must be positive on this one. Last week, the Department of Public Service and Administration passed a rule or a law, which, the media is silent about it and people are not talking about it. That a graduate who do their internship, it should no longer be 1 year. It should be 2 years. I'll tell you why is it a positive move. It's a positive move because that 2 year will have to go into the CVs of those graduates as a 2-year working experience. That was a ruling from the department. And that's something that we should be talking about as a nation. Government should be employing and encouraging the private sector to employ more youth who are graduates in the internship, and that internship should be recognized as experience. That's one of the simple low-hanging fruits that the government can tap on.
I just want to pause you there, and I want us to continue more on what you're talking about because it's fundamental towards getting out of recession. I just want us to go to an ad break, and when we come back, we continue more on this conversation. Sir.